Hello and welcome to the Lonestar Collective, the official podcast of the Texas Cannabis Collective. I'm your host, Chris Grisolia, and I am joined this week by a special guest, Clovis McCary. Welcome, Clovis.
Hey, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. You've come to talk with us about a very interesting business, so I'm just going to kind of let you take the reins and introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, and tell us about your company and what y'all do.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Well, a little bit about myself. I work in the cannabis industry. I have done it at scale now for the better part of a decade. I had learned quite a few lessons growing to scale, and part of those lessons were that you have to keep things clean. Used a lot of equipment along the way. Some of the equipment that we've used, I can remember trying things back in the day that nobody else was doing, using a humidification by attaching hypochlorous molecules to it and doing a humidifier with hypochlorous in it so that I could sanitize rooms. But I used to destroy equipment that way. I've always been a grower. Equipment's expensive. It's one of the most costly things about a grow. Here recently, when COVID happened, we needed a way to sterilize large facilities. The answer and solution to that was using a very small micron misting head and doing an anhydrous injection of hypochlorous, which hypochlorous is an acid. It's a chloride, so it's similar chemically to bleach, but it's a much safer chloride in that our body's own natural immune system naturally makes this oxidant to fight off disease and pathogens inside of our body. It's what our body uses to clean itself from the inside. So it's a very safe product. Now that we can inject this into a facility in a dry manner and not cause corrosion to sensitive electrical components, it's been very, very well utilized across the medical industry to sanitize hospitals throughout the night. My company Arcus, we want to be able to, we recognize the use of it in cannabis sector, and we recognize how it makes the medicine that we're growing better and last longer. If you put a clean product in a sealed environment, which is what a prepackaged product is, that clean environment will stay clean. Until it's in vitro, there's nothing affecting it from the outside other than temperature. And typically there still has to be a microbial or pathogen life form for that temperature to affect it as well. So we believe in a clean start as a clean finish. And I believe in good quality patient meds. And by believing that, this is where Arcus comes in. We sanitize large scale facilities, and we do it overnight on a timed system so that these at-scale cannabis facilities, you don't even have to lose time out of your day for sanitizing the facility. From a labor standpoint alone, it's enormous. By using it repeatedly, you can then create a quality control check. And what we've done in our good agricultural and commercial practice standards is write in a CFU count for what we consider to be clean, and we followed the FDA guidelines for food grade. Anything that has a colony count of less than 150 is considered a food grade preparation. So you have the ability to prepare food on that surface, and OSHA is okay with that. FDA is okay with that. By incorporating those.
Just to clarify for our audience a little bit, when you're talking about sanitizing in the cannabis industry, give some examples of what you're talking about. Because you're talking about like grow rooms and things like that, correct?
Everything from a production facility, a lab setting, to the grow room that the plants are housed in, to the office that you sit at your desk, because you are inevitably going to pick up these pathogens and carry them into the grow facility. The actual environment is going to be most directly affected by your presence there. So by cleaning where you equally reside, then you're adding one more layer of insulation to that clean presence and that sterile environment that you want to promote at all times. And this should be a procedure. When you have a procedure of it getting cleaned every night, then every morning and every day that you come in, you should be able to consider, hey, this particular surface is already sanitized for me to begin my work. where most people's procedures start with, oh, I need to clean this, or I need to clean my area that I'm going to utilize for this procedure, whether it be cannabis trimming or cannabis processing or cannabis packaging or all of the other million things that happen in between. They all happen in a space inside of a building, and every building is susceptible to pathogens. These buildings breathe. That's even with the closed cell foams that we use, they breathe a bit. You have to have some sort of it. It's never perfect. So you can introduce pathogens, and we introduce pathogens every time we walk in and out. By cleaning them on a daily basis, then we can have a standard of what is considered clean and build off of that. And as long as that standard is there in place every day, then you can rely on it.
Yeah.
This particular piece of equipment, it utilizes a dry mist, and it's a 2-micron mist. The particle size is so small that it's barely even affected by gravity. It will float throughout the facility, and you can map it in the facility. So if I have a 100,000 square foot facility, I can put it in one room, and I can take my propane torch, and the flame will burn blue, but in the presence of a sodium or a salt, it will burn orange. So I can map when the hypochlorous has reached that room. And by doing that a couple of times, you can map the time it takes to effectively sanitize the entire building. And then you just set the machine to that time, and then you know every single day you're starting with a completely clean and sterile environment.
Okay, that sounds wild. So, explain the dry mist. How that's mind-boggling when you talk about mist and being dry. So, give a little explanation of that for our listeners.
So, it's got everything to do with the misting mechanism, the fogger head per se. So, we went with a 2-micron particle size, which was the best fogger that you could find right now. It's the best on the market. It's the highest quality available. And we had to achieve that micron size because it's the particulate size that makes hypochlorous so effective at sanitizing things. It's able to penetrate beyond, the seal of a door. If a door is closed, it'll go right around that. Even if it's sealed good enough that light won't be going around it, that doesn't mean it's sealed good enough that, a completely inundating, saturating fog won't go into it. And that's where mapping comes into play. That's why you utilize the torch. And the first couple of times you use this piece of equipment, you map out what gets cleaned and how long it took that room to be cleaned. So we typically put it in, if we're going to roll the equipment in 1,000 square foot room, we'll let it run for 60 seconds, and the entire room is clean. You could check the drains, you can check the air conditioning vents, you can check the lights, the hoods, the tables, the actual canopy itself. Every single aspect of the room that hypochlorous comes into contact with will be sanitized. As a grower, my preferred method of growing as a nutrient source, I use the Athena lineup. And if you're familiar with Cleanse is hypochlorous. So if you're wondering, hey, is this safe for me to be around? Well, you literally feed it to your plants if you use Athena. So that's where it comes into play. We already feed this to the plants from the inside. And when we're feeding it from the inside, we're hoping to, there's the millivoltage of particles. You want to alter that millivoltage between 400 and 600, 0.600, which will make it more caustic to the environment it's going to be in. It makes it want to react more readily to anything that it comes in contact with, which is pathogens. So there's quite a few little tricks with hypochlorous, and it's going to be the future of how things are done. Hypochlorous is going to be used everywhere because it's just like now how we're learning about our endocannabinoid system. It's our body's immune system creates hypochlorous. It's the next thing coming down the pipeline. It's going to be the next big thing that changes everything because it's not a hazardous caustic chemical. It's a naturally occurring compound that our body makes readily and uses to sanitize itself.
Okay, cool. Well, that gets us to the point where we're going to have to take our first sponsor break. When we get back, I want you to dive in a little more in depth about what all this process can be used for, not just in the cannabis industry, but in other industries as well. And how y'all came upon this process too, the whole how you started the company and got going
Right.
when we get back. So we're going to take our first sponsor break right quick. And then, like I say, when we come back, we're going to dive into how he started his company a little bit and then how this process can be used in more ways when we get back.
Howdy, Colt Power here. These days, many people are choosing to add CBD to their wellness routine. Why? Some like CBD for how it may help them with their focus. Others enjoy the way the plant compound may assist them with their sore muscles and relaxation. For me, CBD has been a game changer in keeping my old sports injuries managed so I can work out and be present for my family. If you've ever been curious about CBD, I invite you to check out our Texas-grown, Texas-made products at powerbiofarms.com. That's power, BIOPHARMS.com.
Thrive Apothecary offers an experience truly unique from anything else in Texas. A full-service cannabis solution that is doctor-owned and offers customers every level of cannabis legally available in Texas. From traditional CBD products to emerging hemp-derived THC edibles, smokables, and now medical cannabis. As a licensed medical cannabis provider, prospective patients from anywhere in Texas can book a sponsored online eligibility consultation to determine if they qualify for a medical marijuana prescription from the comfort of their own home. Plus, for Texas veterans, their first prescription appointment is donated by Thrive. Visit thrivetx.com for more information.
Welcome back to the Lonestar Collective podcast, the official podcast of the Texas Cannabis Collective, distributed on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and many more, to give Texans information regarding policy, industry, and culture. And now, back to this week's show.
Welcome back to the Lonestar Collective, the official podcast of the Texas Cannabis Collective. I'm your host, Chris Grisolia. A lot of people call me Gramps. And I'm joined this week by our guest, Clovis McCary. Welcome back, Clovis.
Thank you, Chris. Glad to be back. So as we went out and you mentioned that you wanted to talk about a little bit more about how this technology is used and how it came about. So a little bit about how I became a part of this particular company. I was growing cannabis at scale for a company that I was running as the CEO. I had visited a current cannabis event there in the Oklahoma area. While I was there, I happened to come across this gentleman. This gentleman spoke very passionately about what he was doing. He was aware of what his machine was capable of, but he was still learning how to position and market himself in this particular industry. Because there are so many snake oils in the cannabis industry that what he offered was truly revolutionary technology, that we're just understanding how it really happens. We're just getting there, and this really is the beginning of it, the cusp per se of this technology getting out, and the driving factor behind the reason it's even available to us is something that touched everybody all across the world. COVID-19. Yeah. They had to have a way to sanitize hospitals, and for you and I to be able to go to these hospitals and consider ourselves safe while we're inside of this hospital. And one of the other things that this particular product does is it kills COVID-19 in under 60 seconds. There's not another product that I am familiar with that is capable of that. And I would love to hear it if there is, because I've been looking and I've yet to come across that. So that one aspect alone really puts it available to any industry that has any grouping of people, or that they come together in one place. By sanitizing it, you could mitigate flu season. You could maybe even reduce out of office time or such by offering the most sterile environment for them to be able to operate in. And that's really what you want to do from an employer standpoint. You want to offer the safest, best environment possible. And that's what this technology does. It allows you to offer the cleanest environment possible to an employee. And the more you do for employees and even the consumers of products, same thing. Think of an MRE in the United States military. all of that food gets packaged, and then they don't eat it for years. And if you package microbials in there, well, this technology is utilized in the food industry to sanitize those rooms throughout the day. And those are ever running rooms. They don't really shut down per se for cleaning. They just hold. And that's what we're doing. We're like in Oklahoma, biltong, which is beef jerky, a food processor. They utilize it solely to clean their facility, and they do it every single day. HVAC environments where you have huge HVAC inputs, you could input this piece of equipment into your HVAC input, and you could duct it to anywhere in a building if you had a centralized cooling tower. So you could, in theory, sanitize a high rise in the right situation if that's how you wanted to utilize it.
That's pretty amazing. Really,
it truly is groundbreaking. I mean, for it to not be snake oil like most everything else, it truly is. And the difference is that in 2019 we recognized that we had to have a way to sanitize things, and we recognized that, because I used to do this even myself back in 2015 for cannabis grows. I would fill them with hypochlorous acid, my humidifiers, and I would blow hypochlorous to clean the room when the humidifiers came on, to mitigate my VPD swing. If it got too dry in a room, hey, it's coming on, and I'm doing two things at once. I'm putting moisture back into the room, and I'm keeping that VPD static, and I'm sanitizing everything in it at the same time. So I'm inhibiting mold and growth of botrytis and staphylococcus. Another huge thing, prisons. Staph is a huge problem in prisons. Yeah. Everyone knows somebody that has been affected by cannabis and has had an incident or has a story about somebody that got staph, or that even potentially almost lost their life. So, I mean, if you want to be completely honest, this is a life-saving technology. If you could keep that staph interaction from happening, you've saved lives.
Yeah.
So it has huge implications for what it's going to do. Obviously, Arcus builds it. We put it in hospitals all across the nation. And we want to do that as well as cannabis. We want to put it everywhere. I want every fast food restaurant to have a dry anhydrous hypochlorous injection to sanitize it. Every restaurant, every place that we congregate. The reason that they believe that fast food will be, interactionless except for with equipment is because they can guarantee that stuff's sterile, because you didn't go to the bathrooms and not wash your hands or something like that. That's never a question if it's always clean surfaces. And if robots really do serve our food, they're not going to have people cleaning them. They're going to have another piece of equipment cleaning the equipment. It just makes sense. Labor costs are the most important thing that we do in any industry, especially cannabis. There's a huge labor input. Ask anyone who's ever trimmed a pound of weed what it takes. That they call it trim jail for a reason. You do it forever. It's a very long-winded experience. And so to pull some of the labor out of cleaning when we're not able to pull laborers out of other processes yet, that's huge. We have to mitigate our time wisely, because that's really where we're able to widen those margins. And obviously I focus on everything from a business standpoint. I try to work with people from a business coaching standpoint. And to be able to do that, I have to think of everything right down to what was the labor input to accomplish this process. Yeah. And that's something that's huge. And it's for most people, everyone's got somebody with great advice, but can they really tell you, break it all down for me? Because everything adds up. The guy that's cheaper, is he doing it cheaper because he's cutting corners, or is he doing it cheaper because he knows something I don't know? And I don't want to be the guy that cuts corners. I want to be the guy that knows something, because that's long-term success. Snake oil is never gonna win out. You might have fleeting moments of notoriety, but inevitably someone's going to figure out it, and the jig is going to be up. The proverbial jig will be over, and then your time to shine is over. But when you're offering something that's truly revolutionary and game-changing, which is exactly what this technology is, I think that'll be here for the long run. It's just a matter of educating the people that are doing this, so that they can utilize it appropriately, so that we can have the cleanest meds possible getting put out. And that's something that we're definitely going to try to do here in the state of Texas. We have the ability to educate individuals in advance of them putting a program into place that allows Texans to consume cannabis. Obviously, hemp is available to you, and that I can guarantee they're going to utilize it in that industry. I can guarantee hemp is going to utilize it. Any agricultural practice is where it makes sense. Equipment is. I mean, think of it from an equipment standpoint. When you give people less time to do their job or put a constraint on them, then they tighten up, and typically it falls into cleaning. I didn't clean that today, or I didn't get to that today. I'll get to it tomorrow. It'll be fine until tomorrow. And the way that we feel is that's a situation that never even needs to take place, because when I leave tonight, I'm going to have a protocol in place that handles that, so that when I come in the morning, I'm starting as clean and as fresh each and every day. The organic standpoint, which is something I barely even touched on, it's organic. I mean, how much convincing does it take when our body produces it? I mean, I don't have to convince anybody that listens to this about how cannabis really made a difference in their life prior to medicine believing it. Well, this is the same thing. Medicine is just now understanding it, and it was COVID that caused that understanding to take place. So we're, as bad as COVID was, we're proverbial bright side people. We want to say, hey, this is one of the good things that come up. We realized that we can do sterilization at scale, organically and effectively, from a cost and labor standpoint. And that's truly game changing. Maybe if this was available in 2019, we'd have never had to consider, staying at home ever. Think of it like that. I mean, you really have to put it into perspective that if this technology had already been around, we wouldn't have had to been concerned with it, because it, like I said, it kills COVID and renders it inert in 60 seconds. So
I mean, that very likely could have been right.
Right. I mean, it could have never even got out of Wuhan if they had been utilizing it in that level 5 facility.
Yeah.
So it's huge implications, and that's why we're going to be forefront. We're going to be driving. We're looking to partner ourselves with leaders in the industry, and we want to position ourselves wisely with the people that are trying to do it right. Because let's be real. I worked in Oklahoma, and not everyone was trying to do it right. Some people were trying to make a dollar, and this is how you can make a dollar and do it right at the same time.
I think some of that's been trial and error. I know a few people that took off to Oklahoma and went and got a license when it was back when you didn't have to have the residency requirements and all that,
or even have testing for the first 2 years.
And they just jumped in, head over heels. And then one of them I was talking to, and I'm not going to name anybody or any farms or anything, but I was just shooting the shit with him one day, catching up a couple of weeks ago, and he goes, he said, we finally figured out. He said, every crop, when we take down a crop, we have to sanitize the room before we put another crop in the room.
Yep.
He said, we figured out that's the only way to go.
It's the only way. If you don't start clean, it'll only ever be as clean as the day you start that room.
Exactly.
And that's why I have a system of quality control checks. I use a CFU machine, a colony forming units, to swab our table surfaces to verify, hey, before I can set this room, my SOP is the protocol is to verify cleanliness. And it's huge. Sanitization is the biggest unspoken thing that we deal with right now. It has affected every single individual all across this planet.
Yep, absolutely. Well, that brings us up to our second sponsor break. So we're going to do that. And then when we get back from this sponsor break, I want to talk a little bit and get your ideas, pick your brain. It's something I do to every guest I have on the show, in terms of our situation with the legality, illegality question here in Texas, and what we maybe need to do, and maybe different ways we can start communicating with our lawmakers and things like that to maybe move this subject along, because we're behind the times, I think.
We have arcane legislation in place, and we need to get it rectified.
Absolutely. So we'll get into that when we get back right after this next sponsor break.
Howdy, Colt Power here. These days, many people are choosing to add CBD to their wellness routine. Why? Some like CBD for how it may help them with their focus. Others enjoy the way the plant compound may assist them with their sore muscles and relaxation. For me, CBD has been a game changer in keeping my old sports injuries managed so I can work out and be present for my family. If you've ever been curious about CBD, I invite you to check out our Texas-grown, Texas-made products at powerbiofarms.com. That's power, BIOPHARMS.com.
Thrive Apothecary offers an experience truly unique from anything else in Texas. A full-service cannabis solution that is doctor-owned and offers customers every level of cannabis legally available in Texas. From traditional CBD products to emerging hemp-derived THC edibles, smokables, and now medical cannabis. As a licensed medical cannabis provider, prospective patients from anywhere in Texas can book a sponsored online eligibility consultation to determine if they qualify for a medical marijuana prescription from the comfort of their own home. Plus, for Texas veterans, the first prescription appointment is donated by Thrive. Visit thrivetx.com for more information.
Welcome back to the Lonestar Collective podcast, the official podcast of the Texas Cannabis Collective, distributed on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and many more, to give Texans information regarding policy, industry, and culture. And now, back to this week's show.
Welcome back to the Lone Star Collective, the official podcast of the Texas Cannabis Collective. I'm your host, Chris Grisolia, and I'm joined this week by Clovis McCary. Welcome back, Clovis.
Welcome, Chris. Appreciate it.
You bet. I jumped the gun a little bit there because I did want to get you to talk about, you kind of briefly touched on it, that you're working with some companies in the hemp industry here in Texas currently, but you are available, your company is available. Are you available all across
as consulting?
Texas?
I'm available all across the nation.
Okay.
I've done this, most recently I've been working in Oklahoma and Mississippi. I have a trip coming up to Missouri, and I have a trip to Florida. And then, as always, I'd go to MJ BizCon, and I try to do quite a bit of networking there at MJ BizCon for that week. So for me, that week typically is more than just the fun-filled after parties, which I have no comment, but they are fun-filled, I promise.
Oh, sure. I've been to a couple of those myself. Not at MJ, but at a few other events. So, and
I obviously I work with several entities such as myself. So I do it from a consulting standpoint for getting protocols and procedures into place, to helping getting GACP certifications. I don't know if you're familiar with a company called Perry & Johnson, but they're the world standard for ISO certifications. Every lab that has an ISO 17025 certification was certified by Perry & Johnson. So I've worked directly with Brent McMillan out of Perry & Johnson, the vice president. Great guy. Shout out to Brent, man. Keep it 100, brother. We've done quite a few projects across the country, and we've got plans to do quite a few more. So definitely, if anyone wants to do an internal audit of their facility and see where they're truly at, especially if they believe that federal legalization is something that they're striving for, then I guarantee that good agricultural and commercial practices will be the standard that you will be compliant to, because every corn farmer and every cotton farmer all across this country is GACP compliant, and that's good agricultural and commercial practices. And some people even go a little further and they call it CGACP, which is current good agricultural and commercial practices. Okay. So by being current, that's the term I like to use, CGACP. By being current, some of these current standards are how are you sanitizing that? To get a GACP certification, you have to not only have a standard operating procedure, but you then have to validate that standard operating procedure with an outside entity. And through that validation, that means you have to go through it, and it has to do exactly what you say it does. So if your process is to say that you clean a room for 2 days before you set it, then when that inspector comes to watch you clean that room, that's what he's going to do. He's going to expect to see you clean that room for 2 days because that's what you wrote down on your procedures. But if your procedure is, I run an anhydrous hypochlorous injection overnight, well, that one's pretty easy to demonstrate in real time.
Yeah.
So that's where that comes into play, and that's why I focus. And I don't know if you're familiar with concentrates. I'm a big concentrate guy. I love to work in the processing sector. I believe that solventless products, ice water extraction, hash myself, that's my preferred. Solventless products are where it's at. That's the future. Organic is where it's at. And that's how hypochlorous plays so well into all this, because just like that water and ice that separated that trichrome head from my bubble hash before it was decarboxylated on a low temp plates, so that I got some beautiful live rosin, that's a process. Every one of those processes, and that's there's also good manufacturing processes, and that's the SOPs that apply to that scenario. So I equally love the processing side of things. That's something that I have a passion for. I want it to be done and done correctly, so that people can be excited about what comes out of it. Because I was there in Oklahoma when everyone was like, no, we cannot pre-package cannabis because it will all be horrible. I mean, you know what? They're right. It would be horrible. Nobody's sanitizing their facilities or sanitizing their preparation areas every single day. They want to pretend they are, but in reality, unless you're utilizing a product that doesn't input labor, then nobody has more free time to give in their facility without hiring people. And that comes with a proverbial cost.
Yeah. Most certainly.
So, yeah, that's why we firmly believe this is cutting edge technology. It will catch on. It will catch on quickly, especially between you and I think federal legalization 6 years away. I wish it was closer. I believe 6 years. You have to control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, in my mind, for this to take place. I'm sorry. I would love to believe that it takes less than that, but I'm a realist. If it took less than that, I believe it would have been done.
And I don't think it matters which side does that.
Oh, I don't think it matters either.
It's going to take total control to get it done.
Correct.
For whatever stupid reason.
So to circle back to your previous question about, what do I think it takes to change some of the arcane legislation here in Texas? It takes
beyond what we're already doing.
Right, beyond what we're already doing. So everyone says, learn from history because it's doomed to repeat itself. Well, I want you to know that 788, which is the legislation that allows medical cannabis use in Oklahoma, is a grassroots movement. There was no John Morgan like Florida that paid $100 million to get this legislation signed by 100,000 people and put forth between the House, and then the Senate pushed it forward. That's not how 788 passed. It passed organically, grassroots. I mean, it was as real as it come. I personally went down there and helped write some of that legislation myself. And if you were helping push it, you equally had the opportunity to do that. I have always been a believer that if you don't make the rules, you will live by them. So I like to help guide things. I don't want to be, when I say make the rules, that sounds a little too tyrannical for my flavor, but I'd like to at least guide them. You know what I mean? And stuff like this, good agricultural and commercial practices, of course, that's what we want. We want that to take place. Who doesn't? Who's like, yes, let's cut every corner and put whatever we can in a bag. That's where Oklahoma failed. And we don't want to do that here in Texas.
And that, the point you make, it took the grassroots to get it done in Oklahoma and any state that did it by ballot initiative, for that matter. It was people getting involved, people doing the work, people filling out the petitions and signing them and sending them in and getting the signatures and then going out to the polls and casting their votes on the ballots. I mean, it took actual people doing things.
Yes,
right?
It does.
And that's been
people had to do it.
That's been my biggest argument. I get it. Things have happened. We had, like you've talked about in detail, we had COVID screwed up one whole session. It screwed up all of the groups, the advocacy groups. They've pretty much 100%. Been disbanded to basically nothing, outside of, I think, the collective.
Skeletons of what they were.
Yeah, the collective, I think, is the most active, visible force out there in Texas right now. And I don't just say that because I'm a member of it. I was saying that before I became a member of it. That's why I wanted to become a member of the Texas Cannabis Collective, because
Absolutely.
nothing else seemed to be doing anything. Nobody else seemed to be doing anything, you know. But
well, and it was, I don't know if you're familiar with, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know if you're familiar with David Sloan. He was the president of Normal here in North Fort Worth for a very long time. Shout out to David Sloan. He's a great guy, super great guy. Done a lot of good things for me. And he was the individual that directed me to, hey, maybe you should utilize Oklahoma wisely. And I did. I utilized it to expand my understanding of the plant. And I understand quite a bit, and I understand the deficiencies. That's most important. If you know what correct looks like, then you know what wrong looks like. And that's my saying. And it's procedures that lead to a repeatable outcome. So everything is just apology and procedure away. And you'll find that in the cannabis sector, everyone, you have to have that grower, you have to have this, that, and the third. In reality, if you have an individual that writes the procedures, that completely understands the process, then that grower or that person shouldn't really exist. Everyone should be on the same level. If there's a training module for your employment, and you have to sign off on that you learned it efficiently. And that's where good agricultural and commercial practices come into play, because they require that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what I started to say there was, you see all the polls, and people are probably thinking, oh God, here he goes again, this broken record. But you see all the polls across Texas for years now that say better than 60%, better than 65%, better than 67%. And to break that down, 67% of the population is almost 7 in 10 people.
It's 2 million
That's what
people.
that means.
Yeah, it's over 2 million people.
It's almost 19 million people.
Is it really? I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah. 67% of the Texas population is almost 19 million people. If 19 million people would write their representatives and call their offices and say, legalize it already, even Dan Patrick would have to say, we're going to have to do this.
Yeah, because Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, he has been he's a
stonewall
problem. Yeah, he's a stonewall. He's exactly what he is. He's been good at it. It's why he's been reelected. But times are changing. You know, too many of my friends here in Texas have been persecuted under arcane legislation that shouldn't even exist.
Sure.
I personally suffered at it. It has to change. You have to say, hey, I don't want this to happen to me. And until people do, hey, it will keep happening. We're getting close. Everybody's on the same page. Look at it like this. You're 60, was it 5%, 60%?
67% was the last poll in January.
72% is the margin of the vote that passed 788 in Oklahoma. And 78% is what passed 1952 House Bill, whatever Mississippi's cannabis legislation is. So just look at it. We're not that far off. People just need to have this conversation with their neighbors so that they can say it in public. You
look at the local decrim measures that have passed in Texas.
Denton
passed with like 72%.
Nobody wants to go after it. That's not where they want their tax money going.
San Marcos, I believe, passed with 82% or something like that. But they've all been majorities. They've all been super majorities of the vote.
Yeah, this is not a partisan issue. This is very bipartisan. Every one of your friends and relatives and associates, they're supportive of it. You're just not having that conversation. You have to have it. Until you break the stigmatism of what a stoner is, then you don't want to be viewed in that manner. And I understand it because I get it. I've had that stigmatism broke for myself. I understand as a stoner myself that, it's not people walking around like zombies, crashing their cars and holding up banks. That's not what it is.
I went, I had a little episode, turned out to be nothing, but I'm in my mid 50s. So it's, things happen, you go get them checked out. So I had to go see a cardiologist, and they run me through the ringer just to make sure there's no problems. And there wasn't nothing out of the ordinary for a 55-year-old man. But as the initial appointment, we're talking, and he asks me, he's looking at my medication list, and he goes, and do you take any other supplements other than these? I said, well, I use cannabis. He looked up at me and he goes, really? And I said, yeah, why is that surprising? He goes, you just don't look like somebody that would use cannabis. And I said, majority of people who use cannabis don't look like somebody who would use cannabis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're interacting with people every day. It's the stigmatism that you're in fear of, not the subject material.
I asked him, I said, is that going to be a problem, or do you think that has any effect on why I'm here? And he said, oh, absolutely not. That you're just smoking a little every day. I said, yeah. Well, I said 3 or 4 times a day, but I said, but yeah, that's it. And he goes, ain't worried about it.
Yeah, it's my firm belief that type of conversation, that's the one that changes people's minds. You were in a setting where you couldn't be criticized, and you were ready to talk about it, and that's what it is. You don't talk about cannabis when you get pulled over with a cop. That's not the time for it. You don't want to teach him about how you want to change the legislation. You do it at the county courthouse when there's lots of activists, and you've filed for a permit for y'all all to be there and have your voice heard, and mass participation in those type of events will change legislation. It will go in the direction you want it to, and everybody's life will be better for it. I promise. I know my life personally is better because of cannabis.
Yeah, mine is, and I know so many people that say the same thing. I know more people that say that. Well, I can't even say it because I don't know any that say the opposite of that.
Right. Yeah, I understand. I feel the same way about it. There's, from RSO, Rick Simpson oil, that gentleman highly documented what he did. Thank you, Rick Simpson. You changed the world. It's some things like that where if you believe in it, stand by it, document the whole situation. And then when people ask, hey, why do you want this legislation in place? You tell your story. You don't have to tell somebody else's story. Each and everybody has their own unique story, and it's worth being heard. Every individual. None of our problems are unique. Everybody has issues in their daily life that they have to deal with. It's you don't have to be something you're not, because this is what everybody already is. We've made some mistakes along the way. When alcohol prohibition got revoked, they had to have something to do. And reefer madness was real. They invested a lot of money at the time into that. And, it's a sad thing that happened. I don't want to say it was the worst thing that happened, but it's very, very sad. And it was very, very long standing, and it needs to be changed.
It ranks right on up there for sure.
It ranks right on up there in humanitarian issues for me.
This pictured guy behind me here is my youngest son. He suffered with seizures, and at the age of 23, he refused to break the law to try cannabis, and we lost him.
I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry for your loss.
That is, thank you. That is why I'm in this fight, is because I don't want any other parent to have to deal with that thought. And that's the first thought I have every day when I get up.
Absolutely.
And he's gone because of loss.
When the hurt is deep enough, you have to let go of it a whole bunch of times. And by advocating for what you believe would have saved his life, that's how you help let go of it, man. So congratulations to you, man. I'll support you any way I can, man. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that story. More people need to hear it. What you're doing is the right thing.
It's like I tell the lawmakers when I talk to them. I spent quite a bit of time in Austin this session, and I just tell them point blank, Dr. William Shaughnessy was treating epilepsy, among other things, successfully in the United States with extracts of cannabis in 1850. We knew 173 years ago.
Look, your body naturally produces cannabinoids. Your body produces it. That's why I'm so passionate about my hypochlorous, because our body equally produces it. I recognize the cannabinoids was a big deal, and this is what I see as being the next thing. It's going to be game changing for literally, I believe, everybody that is in a first world scenario. Obviously, that's going to be unable to happen in the Amazon jungle. I'd love for it to.
Yeah, no doubt. It's definitely an intriguing subject. I'm going to have to look into it a lot more, because you've piqued my interest for sure into the whole topic. So hopefully you've done that with some more of our audience members as well. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for us. So before we go, tell our audience members where they can find you, where they can find your company, and maybe reach out if they need to get some of your consulting services.
Absolutely. And you can find me on Instagram at Canna_Clovis, and that's Canna with a K, KANNA_ Clovis, CLOVIS. And you can equally see some of the things I've built out and the individuals I've worked with. There's lots of real reviews from people I've worked with throughout this industry. I firmly believe networking is your net worth. So if anyone wants to do any networking, I'm all about it. Reach out to me. And I'll travel all across the country. I like to travel for this job. I do hope for one day for it to be more remote, kind of like the podcast thing. It's a very remote scenario where I could do it from anywhere.
Sure.
But I believe in data collection, and I believe that data will drive the industry forward. And I don't have to be somewhere. If you have the sensors to collect the data, we can talk about it. So anybody that has that data and they're charting their humidity, temperature, and they're correlating it to their vapor pressure deficit, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to answer those questions, man. I passionately want to pass my knowledge on. I want it to be, prevalent. I want the best for each and every individual, because like I said, nobody's problems are unique, and everybody has gone through something at least once. And the problems that I have the answers to, I want to consult with people that have the same problem to mitigate them, because I don't want that hurt to be so deep they have to let go of it a lot of times. And there are people that have put their life savings into cannabis, and they were not successful. Only 42% of these businesses are operating in the black, and that other 58%, they probably had to let go of that loss many times. And I want to mitigate that letting go of loss, because that's really where we change people's lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, like I said, I want to thank you again, Clovis, for joining us and telling us all about this process. And it's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you for having me on today. It was an absolute pleasure. And I'm honored that you invited me.
Absolutely. And like I said, keep us posted how things go.
Absolutely, I will. Thank you.
It'd be interesting to keep tabs on. Well, that's going to do it for us this week, and appreciate y'all for tuning in, and we hope y'all will join us again. And anybody out there that has a topic like this that they want to bring up, or you got a company that you want to bring to the attention of the public, that you're out there and tell them about what you're doing, hit us up and let us know, and we'll get you on the show and have you tell us about it just like Clovis did. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week.